My name is John Dugan, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Records Services Director and State Archivist in the Missouri Secretary of State's office. When asked to speak at RootsTech, I try to choose a technology topic that I hope will give you insight on an area of genealogy where few people are aware of the details. My goal is to give you a quick behind-the-scenes tour of how the Missouri State Archives places records online for free public access. The most concise example I can provide is our death certificates, where we add one additional year at the beginning of every year, and through the year we reindex 2 additional years to add spouses' and parents' names to the searchable database. The process for other states who place their records online, themselves using volunteers, would be similar. As with most records-related things, the first step is a legal one. The records must be transferred from the State Department of Health, Vital Records Bureau, before they can be worked on at the state archives. The release dates in various states vary dramatically depending on which state and which type of record. Missouri is one of the most restrictive states in the country, but for the last 15 years, death records have been transferred to the Missouri State Archives after they are 50 years old. After the statute changed, the first couple years were pretty rough for the archive staff. Thousands of requests were pouring in monthly from genealogists who wanted copies of their ancestors' death certificates now that they were more available. The archives was swamped and we had to find a better way. The archives did have an active core of remote volunteers, so we called them into action, and in conjunction with the archives imaging staff, almost 2 million death certificates from 1910 to 1959 were indexed, scanned, and placed online over the next 3 years. Today our system is much more streamlined, and I will give you an overview of that process. Every first working day of January, the archives receives a new year of death certificates. Dozens of our in-house volunteers have already pre-labeled the boxes and folders and are ready to start as soon as the staff remove the records from the Record Center boxes. Once the staff separate them into groups that correspond to the numbers covered by each box, the volunteers check each bundle to make sure they are in numerical order and log on the folder faces, missing numbers, duplicate numbers, and files that have multiple pages. This allows the imaging staff to know what variants there are in each folder before they scan them. The volunteers also unfold dog-eared pages and place damaged certificates in polyester sleeves to protect them. Last year, one of the volunteers found her relative's death certificate on prep day. Doesn't she look happy? Once they are prepped, the folders are placed in archival boxes, which are sent to the archives imaging lab. There, staff use 2 rotary scanners to image their certificates as quickly as possible. We stagger work hours until they are done to shave an extra day or 2 off the imaging process. The scanners hardly stop from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. on those days. Of all the steps in the process, scanning, surprisingly, requires the least number of total work days. Most of the time, whenever you talk to the general public about scanning records, this is the only step that they think is required. Over the course of 4 days, the staff not only scan the records, but they conduct multiple quality control reviews of the images and their file names, and reformat them as PDFs for the online indexing application. They also retain the TIFF images for creating multiple microfilm copies that are stored in special vaults on-site and off-site for permanent preservation and disaster recovery purposes. Quality control is extremely important, with 6 layers of checking just in the imaging process alone. In the end, the original records are preserved in the archival boxes, stored on compact shelving in the Missouri State Archive stacks. If the originals are ever needed for future reference, they are securely stored and retrievable there. Once each year's 50,000 plus images are scanned and checked, they are uploaded into the archive's custom online indexing platform where at least 2 volunteers index each certificate. This is referred to as double-blind indexing. To ensure security, each volunteer logs into the indexing page and selects the current project. Because 2 indexers have to type the information exactly the same, accuracy increases exponentially when compared to single-pass indexing. If the first 2 passes are not identical, a third person with a higher accuracy rating types the information the third time. After you index your first 50 or so certificates, indexers typically get in a rhythm once that they know where each of the fields information is on the certificate, and so they can type a lot faster once they've done a few. I often index while watching television, maybe the evening news, or a movie with my family, and that's probably why that my scores aren't as good as many of the indexers. If two of the entries still do not match after 3 passes, the certificate is sent to a staff arbitrator who can choose the correct entry or index the certificate themselves. I want to stop here and point out, though, that we do not correct information on the certificates. If the family, physician, mortuary misspelled something, a court order is required to have the Department of Health amend a certificate. We ask the volunteers, just like FamilySearch does, to type what that they see, and that's what you should do whenever you're indexing using our application as well. When we originally received the death certificates 15 years ago, the archives volunteers indexed from typed indexes provided by the Department of Health. They were really nice and organized, cleanly printed. But when we placed these indexes online, we quickly found out, thanks to the researchers, that about 10% of the records in these original indexes had errors. On top of that, the volunteers who had single pass indexed from these indexes added an additional layer of errors. Diligent souls out there in some of the counties actually went through every single certificate in those counties and sent us literally hundreds of corrections for our database. So even though we won't correct something on the certificate, we will correct things if it's a mistake that we made or our volunteers made in indexing those certificates. When everything is entered and arbitrated, the volunteers are told no additional certificates are available, and the images and indexes are ready to be put in our online database. This normally takes our IT department a day or two to complete. Once online, certificates from 1910 to 1969 can be searched by the deceased name, county, and death month or year. To help with brick wall research, 1957 to 1969 certificates have been re-indexed to allow searches by parents' and spouses' names. This helps with individuals where you don't have complete information. For example, a great aunt who remarried late in life, but you don't remember what her surname was when she died. As time allows, we continue to work our way backwards, re-indexing prior years to solve the errors caused by the original health department indexes and the indexing of our early volunteers, as well as adding these search values. Each month, an average of 2 million searches are made for all Missouri State Archives genealogy databases. Genealogists are constantly out there on the hunt for their relatives, and we appreciate the business. I would be remiss not to mention the Missouri State Archives' awesome electronic records volunteer corps. We call them our e-volunteers. The National Archives refers to them as citizen archivists. The Missouri State Archives e-volunteer group led the nation in the 1940 census indexing project coordinated by FamilySearch, and today they index records as diverse as military, land, and Missouri State Penitentiary records, as well as a special closed group using FamilySearch's indexing platform to index the Missouri marriages. I want to thank all of you who are volunteers out there, and thank you whether you're a Missouri State Archives volunteer, a FamilySearch volunteer, or you volunteer at your local historical or genealogical society. We quite literally could not do this without you, and I want to thank you for that. And I guess I should close by saying, if you want to be a volunteer, send us an email, and we'd be glad to have you help us index the Missouri State Archives records. Thank you so much.